Yo, what's going on, YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy, Kevin Forte, and today we're taking a look at the latest on the Montreal Canadiens GM search, as well as some potential trades that could be on the horizon for Les Habitants. So we'll be going over that today. So the Montreal Canadiens, obviously, there's a lot of talk throughout the organization about some potential changes. Obviously, now that Marc Bergevin is gone, there's been a lot of debate about what the future holds for your Montreal Canadiens. So, the Montreal Canadiens have been on the GM search for a little while now, and there have been plenty of names in the conversation. But at this point, there's been a new name that we haven't really heard much about up until the last 2 or 3 days. And that seems to be the focal point for what Jeff Gorton had in his press conference the other day. The team is pushed to go in a different direction. This isn't going to be the Habs team that is just a big defensive team with guys like Shea Weber and Ben Chiarot that just push teams around and move them around, and Joel Edmondson. There's going to be a very different angle to the Montreal Canadiens moving forward, something we have not seen before. Now, there's always people that are going to give some flack to teams that go the quote-unquote analytical route, but it seems like the Montreal Canadiens will be going down that same path. So, let's look at the Montreal Canadiens. So, this is all from Cap Friendly. Thank you very much, Cap Friendly. They have no cap space. Their projected long-term injured reserve money, they have $11 million in there. Who was on that long-term injured reserve list? Josh Anderson and Joel Edmondson. And they both have modified no-trade clause, but it doesn't really matter. As well as Shea Weber and Paul Byron, who are both on the long-term injured reserve. So you have 2 guys on the regular injured reserve, and then 2 guys on the long-term injured reserve. A couple of pending contracts as well. You have Arturi Lehkonen, Cedric Paquette, Matthew Perreault, Michael Pezzetta. We don't know much about him, but he's there. Ben Chiarot on the blue line, Brett Kulak, Alex Romanov, Kale Clague, and Chris Weidman on defense, and then Samuel Montembeault in between the pipes. So that is all the guys' contracts that are ending this year, as well as Sami Niku, who is on the IR. All right, so with that said, we have a little bit of a blueprint of where the Habs are and what the direction could be. It seems like the Habs are looking to sell at this year's deadline. Now, the problem is they can't really, you can only take this with so much, you can take it with a grain of salt because we don't know what the new general manager's mindset will be when he comes in. Now, I assume a lot of that is going to be the same sentiment of Jeff Gorton, and that's probably what he's going through in the screening process for who he wants as the next GM there. But from that, the press conference Jeff Gorton held at the Bell Center the other night. This is from Eric Engels. Gorton would like to build staff dedicated to analytics. Canadians will be transparent and respond to a rebuild if that's the road they end up going down. New GM likely not brought on before Christmas. Ducharme will be coach for the rest of the season. So it sounds like Ducharme is safe for now. Now, I don't know what that means for the future, but again, that may be something where Jeff Gorton says, hey, we got the GM. All right, GM, it's your job to go find the right head coach. That'll be his job. And I think that's kind of what the sentiment from that timeline looks like. Now, this is from Elliot Friedman. The Canadiens are interested in agent Kent Hughes. Born in Montreal, he's bilingual. Among client lists are Bergeron and Letang. And that's going to get further into the story. I'll talk about this in a minute. I think he's on Montreal's radar as a GM candidate. The Habs haven't reached out to interview anybody yet. So, Kent Hughes. Now, I think the most important thing you have to take away from this is his players that are under his umbrella. Patrice Bergeron and Chris Letang. Now, the reason I bring those 2 names up is they've been, well, at the very least, Chris Letang was in conversations of going to Montreal a few years back. When the Pittsburgh Penguins are kind of sliding, the Penguins were looking for a defenseman. He seemed to be the name that kept coming up. And obviously, being from Quebec, it did make some sense. Now, here's the situation with Chris Letang, though. Chris Letang is on the final year of a contract he had with the Pittsburgh Penguins. He's 34 years old, making $7.25 million. Chris Letang is probably not going to look for that same contract. He signed that deal back in 2013, July 1st of 2013. So it was an 8-year deal, $58 million over that span, and $7.25 million per season annual average cap hit on Letang. He has a modified no-trade clause and a no-move clause, which may play into it. But again, he's from Quebec. If he wants to go to Montreal, he would probably be willing to swing a trade, in the sense that if Pittsburgh could make a trade for him, the Habs would be able to oblige to that. Or if they just go the safe route and wait till his contract ends at the end of the year. Again, it's not like the Habs are a playoff team and are trying to make the Stanley Cup playoffs here. It may be better off that they wait till the offseason to make such a move. Now the other guy, Bergeron. You ever heard of him? Patrice Bergeron, one of the top 5 centers in the NHL, always a Selke candidate. Well, Patrice Bergeron also has 1 year left on his contract. The captain of the Boston Bruins right now. He is 36 years old, and he's from Anchier-Laurier, Quebec. So he's right down the road from the Montreal Canadiens. Again, he signed an 8-year, $55 million contract that is paying him $6.875 million per season. Just like Letang, he also has a modified no-trade clause. The player submits a 3-team no-trade list, and you would assume the Montreal Canadiens would not be one of those 3 teams. Like I said, $6.875 million per season. And again, these are 2 older players, but they would be a great way for the Montreal Canadiens to rebuild. And I think Bergeron, yeah, he's won a Stanley Cup. I'm sure he would love to win another one. But if they're looking in the direction of, I could go to my hometown, we could sign here together, Bergeron and Letang going up back to their hometown together at 35 and 36 years old respectively, to help build around Nick Suzuki, Cole Caulfield, Alex Romanov. This could be the start of something for the Montreal Canadiens as they look to move in another direction. Now, Jeff Gorton has also had some success. You remember where he was with, I believe he was with, obviously he was with the Rangers for a little while. They didn't do much, but depending on the GM they bring in, depending on how the coaching looks, would the Montreal Canadiens be able to swing those 2 guys to go to Montreal? Now, I definitely think there's a strong argument to that, especially if you bring both of them in together. Now, here's the other thing. How much cap space are the Habs going to have? Because money talks, and if the Montreal Canadiens are willing to dish up the money on maybe a 2 or 3 year deal for each of them, would they be able to make that work? Now, their projected salary cap hit is $84 million next year, which means they practically have no cap space for next year. So they would have to make some moves, which makes the conversation around Shea Weber, the situation around Paul Byron, and Josh Anderson, would they be able to move some of those guys out? Now, Carey Price also has a massive cap hit at $10.5 million for the next 5 years. That's a lot of money. That's over $100 million over the next 5 years to Carey Price. So the Montreal Canadiens have some big decisions to make. And you're looking at some guys like Brendan Gallagher, $6.5 million cap hit. Would he be a guy that gets moved? He's got a modified no-trade clause as well. Let's take a look. Jeff Petrie, he's got 4 years left at $6.25 million per season. He will be 37 by the end of that contract. Another name that may be interesting. They just brought him in, but Mike Hoffman at $4.5 million. He's 32 years old. He's a little bit older. Is he a guy they could maybe try and get rid of? So the Montreal Canadiens definitely have some guys that could be available. Now, this is what we've been hearing from Pierre LeBrun. Ben Chiarot is high up on some trade boards right now. He's a pending unrestricted free agent, and a few contending teams value him greatly. The New York Islanders. He can absolutely fetch a first-round pick. He has a 10-team no-trade list, probably will be dealt before March 21st. Now, the problem is, I just coughed the Islanders, but the problem is the Islanders are on a 10-game losing streak toward the bottom of the NHL standings. My sentiment is, if I'm the Islanders, I'm not trading away my first-round pick. And if that's the price for Ben Chiarot, he could kick rocks. That's not going to happen for the New York Islanders. But let's put it this way. If the Montreal Canadiens here get a first-round pick for Ben Chiarot, right? So you move Ben Chiarot, and you also save $3.5 million of cap space for next year. I guess it doesn't really matter because his contract doesn't carry over. They need to move out guys that have some cap on them. Now, the reason that they may look to trade Petrie, or they may look to trade some of these other players, is so they can make room for one of or both of Letang and Bergeron. And could it be one of those things where they played together when they were younger and they say, you know what, I wouldn't mind, playing again with Letang, or I wouldn't mind playing with Bergeron again. So that is something to keep an eye on. The Montreal Canadiens are definitely going to be the team to watch this offseason. There's going to be questions again about Dominic Ducharme. There's going to be questions over the next couple months till March 21st about the trades that may happen up to that point. But over the next couple months, we're going to get an idea of where the Montreal Canadiens sit. If you start seeing them trade out guys like Jeff Petrie, like Ben Chiarot, like Mike Hoffman or Toffoli, you're seeing them move out cap space. And for what reason that may be? It may be to bring in some of those big free agents that are available from Quebec in the summer of 2022. So guys, let me know what you think in the comment section down below. What do you think of Jeff Gorton's press conference the other day on the Montreal Canadiens? Do you agree with the direction of the team? Would you like to see them completely rebuild it? Don't sign more big contracts? What is the sentiment in Montreal? I want to hear your guys' thoughts down below. Guys, as always, thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you again next time.